Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to another week on the podcast. And I'm excited to have another guest on this week, the lovely Christina Smith, who is a life coach for women. And I appreciate your time and having you here, Christina. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm very excited about this conversation. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, so we are going to be diving into reparenting using the mother archetype, which I'm really excited to hear more on and how you weave that into what you do and your work. But first, I would really love for you to share a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do, any passions, anything you'd love to share.
Sure. Yeah, I am a nomad. I live in the United States. I live all over the United States though, so I think we're might be going for a goal of hitting all of them. And so we move a lot, but my life wasn't always that way. I used to have a corporate job and a corporate place, back when we used to go to offices and such. Um, and I was really unhappy for a long time. I realized, and I wasn't taking care of myself. And this leads into why I'm a life coach today, is because my son was in therapy because his dad had moved away and I just felt like he needed it. And then one day his therapist said to me, Christina, do you see a therapist? And I'm like, oh, I don't. I should. I know. I'll get to it. I'm just so busy, busy, have our children and such to take care of. And so I still had time to take him to therapy though, and I had to sit there. So that's funny, isn't it? And then a couple months later, she was like, Christina, have you gotten a therapist yet? And I was like, oh, no, I will. Uh-huh, uh-huh. All the things that we say. And we're like, we know we should be taking care of ourselves and we're not. And then she goes, well, I think he'll be fine when you are. And that was this whole big realization that like I found a counselor the next day because I couldn't believe that how I was and how I was taking care of myself was impacting my child so much. And we don't realize this as parents. We think that we're putting on this good smile and we're putting on this good act and that none of this is impacting our children. And we forget how much our children observe. Even if they don't know what's going on, they know something is going on. And by not taking care of myself, how could I take him to therapy and say, hey, this is good for you, but not for me, right? Like, and this is all really, really important because it goes down to what we're going to talk about today, which is about this mother archetype. And the truth is, we treat our children the way we parent them the way that we want to parent them. We parent ourselves the way our parents parented us. And so it's a huge difference, right? In my family growing up, therapy wasn't really an option. You had to have like real problems, whatever that means. And we didn't have them. So like really, I lived in a very different childhood than I gave my son. And yet the inner talk that was going on for me was like, oh, you should just be able to figure this out by yourself. You should, all these things that I would never say to him, right? I would never say that to my son, but like, oh, why are you being so stupid about this? Just, why can't you focus, right? I would be so mean to myself inside my head. And yet I would never do that to a child. And yet that's what we're doing to that inner
Mm.
child part of ourselves every time we have those conversations. And so I was constantly basically telling my inner child, therapy isn't really important for you. You're not important enough for that. You're not important enough to take care of yourself. Your time isn't really yours. And we wonder why we get into this space of feeling really powerless in our lives. And I really believe it's because we haven't taken care of our inner child. So, all that to say that this is one of the areas that I do help women with because it's really about it impacts our confidence, it impacts our self love. And all of that impacts how our children see us and the permissions that we're giving them, right? So, if I'm not taking care of myself, that means to my children, that means when they grow up, they are not allowed to take care of themselves when they have children either. They only care for their family, right? Because we've seen this as a generational kind of curse, haven't we? Where my mother doesn't take care of herself, she's the martyr of the family, and then I learned to be the martyr of the family, and my
Mm,
children learn how to be the martyr of the family. So reparenting our inner child is really important because it helps us get to a more empowered space is really what it is.
yeah, for sure. Yes. um, Reparenting is a term that a few years ago it was not even on my radar or vocabulary really. So I guess for people that might not even know what that term is or what it actually means, I'd love for you to go into a little bit more detail around
Sure.
this term and this reparenting.
Even explaining, like, what is this? I'm talking about our inner child. I know a lot of us are familiar with our inner child. We've heard that word before. But when I work with women, I work with archetypes. Because to
Mm,
me, archetypes are the energies, the roles and energies that we kind of hold. So often women are like, what archetype am I? No, you're all of them. So you have a warrior in you have a mother in you have a queen, a maiden, a wild woman. All of those archetypes live within you. And I especially work with the mother and the child the most because usually confidence, which is what I really, my goal for midlife women is for them all to feel confident, that is impacted by our inner child and how much we've been caring or not caring for her.
yeah.
So when we talk about archetypal energies, we know what that energy is like. Like when we talk about inner child, we know that the child is playful and fun and learning. And that's the things that they really get excited about, being curious about
Mm,
things, making things playful and fun. That's what they're all about. And if we think about a mother archetype, we could probably give it the same energy 10,000 years. They could have looked at a mother energy and been like, it's the same things, right? It's a caregiver, it's a nurturer, it's the one who births things. And even if you're not a mom, you still have mother energy because you're birthing businesses, ideas, projects, whatever the thing is, right? So your mother energy isn't just for your children. But when we have both of these energies, right? And we know we felt them both before, probably at some point, um, where we know what it feels like to be in our mother energy and we know what it's like to be in our child energy. And those are completely different. Would you agree with me, Monique?
yes. I would
Yeah.
definitely agree.
Yeah. One is more empowered and the other one isn't, right? And chances are, for most of us, we feel our child energy the most when we're in that wounded child energy and we feel powerless. For me personally, I go to shaming and blaming others and myself. And I'll go, oh, you're so stupid, Christina. Why would you do it that way? And why are you, what's wrong with you? All of these words that are not really nice. We would never say them to our children, but we do say them to ourselves because, again, our inner parent unconsciously will parent the way our parents parented us,
Mm,
not the conscious way in which we're choosing to parent our children. So, really, we want to check in with that mother archetype and ask, is that something I would say to my child? Is
yeah.
that something I would do or question my child about? No. Well, then we don't want to be doing that for ourselves because that's not very helpful. We are really attached to things like, at least for me, I grew up Gen X, so we're really attached to external validation.
Yeah.
And especially as a parent, it's the hardest thing. I took my kid on a cruise when he was 4 months old. You'll never get more advice than you will on a cruise for being a parent. And so we just have to remember that our mother archetype is there to care for our inner child. And that means giving ourselves permission
Mm,
to slow down, to really think about what is it that I need, not just everybody else around me, but what is it that I need? Because the more that I fill my cup up, the better that my family is. And the way that we're going to mother ourselves is by consciously saying the things that we would say to our children. I feel like I had a thought and then it moved. Sorry about that. That
no,
is my
that's all
midlife
good. All
Yes.
good.
But the mother archetype is the one who can really care for that inner child and can slow down and ask what that inner child needs.
Mm,
Most of my clients, when they first meet their inner child, she's screaming and yelling and throwing a fit. And they can't understand that. She's not talking to them. She's not, we do a lot of visualization. So that's what usually when they meet their child. But
mm,
really sitting with yourself, there's lots of ways to connect with that inner child. I keep this little picture of me at 7 on my desk
yeah.
so that I can remember my inner child and I'm nicer to her.
Mm,
Because often we don't realize we're talking to her.
yeah.
Um, and we really want to be nicer to her
Mm,
because that's going to show ourselves that we are taking care of ourselves. I was just talking to a client tonight and she was shaming herself for something for, she's trying to be healthy and she was not making healthy choices. And when we looked at it, it was because she was having arguments with her husband. And so her small part of her that was feeling small at the time because of this argument went into her small behaviors, right? Which is becoming powerless and eating ice cream. That's her thing. But she doesn't want to eat the ice cream anymore. She's not supposed to eat the ice cream anymore, according to her doctor. And so she has to reparent herself. And what that looks like is saying, wow, I hear, inner child, that you really want to have some ice cream right now, and we're not supposed to have ice cream. So, what is it that we actually need from that ice cream that we could maybe get in a different way? Right? The same way we would with our kids, just because our kids want something, we don't necessarily give it to them, right? Like that would
mm.
be crazy. They can't have chocolate cupcakes every day for breakfast. They just can't.
But they will argue with you that they can.
Yes, exactly. And so will our inner child, right? So that part of us that's constantly like, oh, we could have the chocolate cupcakes today, right? Like we'll start that diet tomorrow. That's our inner child being sneaky, right? And so by reparenting her and doing it in a compassionate way, not a shameful way, which was how I was raised, when we do it in a compassionate way and say, yes, I see you, I understand this is what you want, we're not going to be
Mm,
doing that, but let's find another solution. Let's be kind about it, opposed to the way that my mother would have done it, which is like, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. What will people think? All those like really
yeah.
harsh kind of statements. But when we can be kind to our inner child, she stops screaming so much and we can actually make healthier choices for ourselves. But it really takes us being kind and standing up for her. Reparenting can show up in the ways that we ask for what we want instead of throwing a fit, right? Like being able to ask people for what we want is a really good way of reparenting ourselves. And oh my goodness, I had such a great thought and then it fleeted again. I guess this is why I don't do podcasts so late at night. I'm so sorry.
And that's all right. I mean, you've touched on a lot there, and especially, I mean, some different things that you can do. But I guess for someone who might even be, if this is like a new concept to them, or
Mm,
who might be struggling with, I guess, understanding their inner child's needs and
mm,
even that voice, like how, I guess, how can someone really tap into that and start to understand and start to nurture, I suppose, like bring that mother energy into that, for someone who is completely new concept. Like, how
yeah.
do I know that's my inner child versus, something else, or just
Whew.
someone projecting something?
Yeah, our inner child, usually when she comes up and she's wounded, and which is most of the time that we're gonna, if you haven't been consciously paying attention to your inner child or that small part of you, we're gonna feel it the most when she's upset. And we feel that. For me, it's like automatically when I feel powerless, when I feel like life is
Mm,
overwhelming, when I feel like life is too much. That's definitely when I can feel my inner child. She's like right there going, I'm powerless and I feel overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. And I mean, that makes sense, right? Because that's child energy. They don't know how to solve problems. They don't have the best solutions to things. They are pretty powerless. They have adults taking care of them. So when we are feeling powerless, that is most likely your inner child right there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty easy to point out. Now,
Mm,
shifting when you're feeling that way, right? Because I know when I feel that way, I want to be even meaner to myself sometimes, like, oh, stop it, Christian, stop crying about that. Put your big girl pants on and just let's go. That's my
yeah.
mother's voice. That's
Yeah.
exactly what she would have said to me. But my mother archetype knows better than that, right? Because I've used that mother archetype for my children. So my mother archetype would go, ah, yeah, that really sinks to feel so overwhelmed, doesn't it? It really, wow. Sometimes life gets to be really hard, doesn't it? And so, what's going on? What is it that you need right now? And I like literally visualize them. Now I have visualizations out there. So if somebody's really wanting one, come email me and I'll send you one. But there are visualizations where you can see your mother archetype walk up to your child in gentle, loving ways and listen to her. Because the thing is, like, when we can go into visualization, we kind of put our egos down and all the logistics and all that other stuff, and we can just use our imagination. And we really do know what we need. We just don't want to give it to ourselves sometimes because it feels selfish or weak, or
Mm,
why can't I just muscle through this? I don't
yeah.
have time for that, right? All of these excuses we make up when we could be taking care of ourselves and we choose not to.
Yeah. Yes, I resonate a lot with that. Especially, and it's that, I guess, that conditioning or how we've been brought up to like soldier on, just
Mm.
keep
Mhm.
going. You'll be right. I mean, that's such an Aussie. Aussie saying, she'll be right. Um,
Yeah, we don't have that saying, but I get the energy
I'm
behind it for
fine. Like,
sure.
all those sorts of
Yeah,
things. It's like,
you'll be fine, just keep going. You
yeah,
don't
yeah,
you're not sad, you're not angry, that's nothing to be sad or angry about. Just keep going. It doesn't matter how you're feeling, right? That's
yeah,
really how my mother would have
mm,
talked to me.
yeah,
And so talking to my inner child like that now is not helpful because it's just telling her she's still wrong and she's still invalidated, right? Of
yes,
like, she is feeling sad, she is feeling overwhelmed or angry, and that's okay. Like, acknowledging it and going, yes, that's a valid feeling right now. It doesn't mean that we can just go into a closet and hide for 3 days. I mean, we may not be able to do that, but we can at least listen and hear that. And so much, I've sat in so many women's circles, and so much of women's power comes back when they're just able to speak to it.
yes, yeah. Yeah, and I did see actually that you facilitate women's circles. Is that correct? Yeah,
Mhm.
and so do I. And it's such a beautiful space to be able to voice those things and be vulnerable. But like you were saying as well, it's also that ability to be able to also validate ourselves and acknowledge ourselves instead of just pushing things down or suppressing our emotions and all of that. So and that's been
And
a big one
even
for me as well. Big, huge for me in the last few years, especially.
Yeah, and even speaking up for ourselves, right? I have clients who are like, "Oh, I was going to speak up for myself, but I didn't think it would make a difference." I'm like, "It
Mm,
does make a difference. The outcome may not have turned out any different. That other person may not care that you're speaking up for yourself and still give you the same answer, but inside, your inner
mm,
child sees that. And
yeah,
your inner child is like, "Oh, you're standing up for me. I am important. I actually am important because look, you're taking a risk to
yeah,
speak up for me right now." And that really, it seems like such a minor thing, but it really starts shifting something within my clients that
mm,
they're like, oh, I am important. Because remember, we are that inner child. And I am important. It is important for me to speak up for myself. And they gain that confidence of like being a whole person rather than feeling like they're, second class citizens to everyone else that they're people pleasing or trying to make happy around them.
mm, yes, yeah, for sure. And you've spoken about a couple of things in terms of I guess, more practical things that someone can do, such as your visualizations. And I'm so happy to share them in the show notes as well. But for someone who's wanting to connect more with their inner child, what would you suggest for someone starting off who?
Yeah, get some pictures of your inner child. I mean, get some pictures of you as a child, whatever age feels right for you. Maybe get several different ages and really just stare at that picture and imagine, remember being that age and ask them, what is it that you need? What is it that I needed when I was 7 or 8 or 10? What is it that I wanted the most then, right? And so, I mean, I hate to go back to the, mundane thing that people don't like is the journaling, but really like writing down these things and writing down these thoughts, it's about really sifting through those memories because there were, even if we had the most perfect parents in the whole world, they still, there's still going to be you're still going to have had moments that you were like, I wish they would have done this instead, or I wish they would have been kinder, or I wish, this moment they would have just done this thing a little bit different or said it differently. Because I mean, none of us are perfect. We weren't perfect children, they're not perfect parents, and it continues on in cycles. So really understanding that we all have this wounded inner child, whether we had the perfect childhood or not.
Yeah.
We all have wounds in our inner child. And so, really asking them, what is it that you need now? And they'll
Mm,
answer you if you are still enough. I mean, sometimes it takes a little while for the child to stop screaming. Like I said, I've had many of clients who have started visualizing their inner child, and the child is screaming and throwing a fit because she wants to know that you're going to stand around, you're actually going to stick around and like follow through and really take care of her for the maybe the first time in your life.
mm, yeah. I love that picture. And it's funny you say that. I was like, I've been meaning to do that. So that's like perfect reminder for me to go and rummage through some photos and find a
Mhm.
photo of myself, because I've got an altar that I've set up in my bedroom and it's got lots of little things. I'm like, it would be the perfect place to put that photo because it's something I go to every day. It's going to just be that constant reminder. So I love that idea. And I have heard of doing that before and I haven't done it. So I'm going to get onto that now.
Yeah, yeah, I keep her right here just so when I start going, you're so stupid, or what's wrong with you? I like look at her, I'm like, that's who you're talking to.
Mm,
That's who you're talking to is that little girl. And I mean, do I really need to talk to myself that way? It's so crazy the way that we talk to ourselves, even though we would never, ever say those things to someone we love.
mm,
So that's why I keep her close because I want to remind myself that I'm not telling the adult me this because the adult me knows that none of that stuff that I'm saying is true, but that inner child is hearing it and she takes it in.
yeah. And it sounds like I speak a lot around self-compassion and
Mm.
kindness for mothers. And it feels like that's such a big piece of reparenting our inner child as well.
It is. And I work with midlife women specifically. So they're beyond like, I wish I would have had these skills when I had kids, like that were younger. And, like, of course, we all wish that we could have gone back before we were parents and became perfect and then had. But it's true. Like, I wish I had those skills then. And these are skills that lots of women don't get until midlife. And so I'm not discouraging you. I'm just like, I'm excited for your audience that has children still to like start looking at it because it's so blatantly obvious when we have children because like the words I say in my head would never be the words that would come out, and
Mm,
yet somehow me treating myself badly is okay,
mm.
even though I would never allow myself to treat someone else that way.
Yes. Well, the old saying, we're our own worst critic.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I'm trying to turn that around and being our own best cheerleader or, you
Yes.
know, comforter, mother, nurturing, healing, like all of that energy comes with the mother archetype. And so if we're
Mm,
really going to nurture and heal, we really have to actually be nice to ourselves to nurture and heal. It's
Yes.
not stuff that happens by being mean to ourselves. And some of us were raised with a huge amount of shame, in the way that, like, I was raised Catholic, and I'm not saying all Catholics are like this, but my mother really used it as, if I don't do what God wants, then I should feel shameful of myself all the time. So all that did for me was every time I made a mistake as an adult, I wanted to punish myself. I wanted to shame
Mm,
myself. And that really doesn't make us any better. We think like, oh, if I just make myself feel bad enough, I'll do it differently next time. You
yeah.
know, you might do it differently next time, even if you're nice to yourself.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
attest to that. I can attest to that. Like
That's
it's
right. You can still be
really
kind to yourself and
unbelievable.
do it differently as well.
Yes. And you can still make change, I promise you. You absolutely do not need to be mean to yourself in order to make change happen.
Yes, and that's such a great reminder. Um, are there any other practical tips? I mean, I am really excited to actually check out one of your visualizations now. But aside from obviously the self-compassion, having that physical reminder with the photo and visualizations, is there anything else that someone can tap into?
Yeah. You can give her play dates. Right? So sometimes our inner child doesn't want to come out because, well, we've been no fun. You know, we've been working our
Yep.
butts off for everybody else, and it's been no fun. So taking your inner child on a play date, what did you like to do when you were a kid? Did you collect stickers or color or play with Barbies? I mean, I don't know what millions of things that we all did,
Yep.
you know, climbing trees even. Some of us have a nature child within us. My child loves to come out when I'm like outside in water. That's her
Mm,
thing. She loves it. And so, you know, making space for her to come out a little bit more instead of always being so serious, you know, having something that we're curious about is helpful. So having something that we want to have be playful and fun and making that space in our lives for it and making it
mm,
important because we can often say,
yes.
oh, it's fun. That can slide right off. I don't need to do that. These other things have to get done. Well, imagine this is like life-saving energy for that child, you know, like you really do need to play some. And so that's another way. So anytime that we're using our inner child, I still visualize her often. I mean, almost every day, especially if I'm in a cranky mood, I want to check in with her and be like, what's wrong with us, you know? What's going on with us right now? Not
Mm,
wrong in a bad way, but what's going on for us right now? And she'll tell me. I remember my first visualization with my inner child. She was screaming and she was crying. I couldn't really understand her. And then shoot down to like 15 years later, just this past winter, I was doing a visualization with her and my inner wise woman. And she came up, she was skipping and she was happy. And it was weird because it wasn't a really happy part of my life. There was other things going on, but she was happy. And she was like, you have all these friends, all these women friends and these women circles that you run. And I'm getting enough space and nature and joy and play. And she was just like, I'm really good. And it was like the first time she'd ever come up and she's like, I'm great. I don't know. I'm gonna go play, you go do your thing. I'm gonna go play. I'm having fun. And it was just an absolute like beautiful thing. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes just even thinking about it because I was like, wow, that's a lot of healing. And
mm,
that's really what this is about. It's about healing our relationship with ourselves
yeah. Yes. Play dates. I love that. And it's one thing to engage in play with our kids, but then it's another thing to do it just for ourselves, purely for our own enjoyment.
with
And
our girlfriends or even alone. But like, you know, it's different when you kind of have to be mom too. You
yeah.
can be in your child with your children, absolutely. And you always have to be that one that pops back into the empowered adult at some point.
Mm,
But
yeah.
yeah, I find I get a lot of play with my friends. I mean, especially now that I don't have little children at home anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I get to play with my friends now and have slumber parties or
Yeah.
go dancing or something, whatever it is that my little girl wants to do.
And making it a priority as well. Yes, definitely.
Yes, yes.
Um, I mean, I am a creative person. I play music and love dancing. So that's been a huge thing for me to, I guess, reacquaint myself in some ways with that creative side of myself just for me, because I use music and dance a lot with clients and things.
Mm.
I'd stopped doing it just for me for quite a long time. So the last couple of years, especially, it's been such a beautiful way to, yeah, reconnect with my inner child and bring that play back through that creative outlet, which I've really enjoyed doing again. Because yeah, you do forget sometimes, and we
It
get,
becomes work
yeah,
instead, right? And it's
yes,
no longer
exactly,
fun or
yes,
playful. And yeah, we just have to make that. What I'm hearing is you made a commitment to be like, I'm actually going to bring some more of that in for myself. And that's
yeah,
really awesome because that, I mean,
yeah,
it seems so silly, but the biggest part that my clients have a problem with is giving themselves permission. Oh,
mm,
well, I was going to, but I couldn't because. And it's like,
mm,
that's baloney. We know whatever is most important to us, we make time for, right? We find it, even if it's dancing in the bathroom for 10 minutes by yourself,
mm,
right? You could do that, even if you have littles or whatever else going on in your life. Like, it is possible to take 5 minutes here or 10 minutes there, even if you can't take a whole evening or day at this point, you're not used to that.
mm,
You can and you will, but you
yes.
have sometimes we have to start with smaller bits.
Yeah, yeah. And they can make a huge difference, even if it's just for a few minutes. Like I'm well known to crank the music in the kitchen and
Mhm.
dance around the kitchen while I'm getting dinner ready. And my kids sometimes join in, sometimes they're just off doing their own thing. But I'm like, no, this music is mine, and I'm not listening to any of my kids' music for this 5 or 10 minutes,
Mhm.
making it a priority. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's little things, of course, that we can do as well, which is a great reminder, because often we can get caught up in the, oh, like, the excuses. It takes too much time. I don't have time for that, and all of those things that we've all said at some point or another. But yeah, it is really, for me, it's been making that conscious commitment to myself and being intentional with my time as well. So yeah, it's a great reminder. Thank you.
Yeah, and take a look at that picture of little you when you're saying, "Nope, I'm not gonna have fun with myself because I'm gonna get these other projects done or these other tasks on my list done." Take a look at your picture of yourself and say, "Yep, not again," right? And I'm sure that all of us, or most of us, have experienced that feeling of somebody is too busy for us.
Mm,
Oof. That was my childhood. So when I look at that picture and I say, "Oh, sorry, don't have time for you today," it's like I can feel that as a child
yeah.
of going, "Oh, really? What's more important than me?"
Mm,
Right? And then she gets like angry. And then I'm like, "Oh, she's going to be angry. You're right. I had a commitment and I'm going to follow through on that commitment just like I would if it was my own physical child or my husband or whoever is in my life. I would, if I
mm,
made a commitment, I would follow through on it. Why we don't do that for ourselves? Because we just have decided that we're not that important. And that's what our inner child hears when we
mm,
pass that commitment up is they're like, oh, right, because I'm not that important.
yeah. Mm, got to make it a priority for sure. I would love to know, for anyone that wants to get in contact with you or connect with you, where do you hang out? Where's the best place to connect?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Christina Smith XOXO. And you can find my podcast coming back for another season this fall. So
Amazing.
we're going to do panels of women, so little circles of women. We're going to have conversations about things that affect midlife women. So, and that could be all the way down to 30. So if you're listening, you're probably a midlife woman. Or we would consider, we would grant godfather you in as a midlife woman, obviously. So you can find that at invitingshift.com is where my podcast is. And if you want to email me for one of those visualizations, feel free to Christina at christina-smith.com. and I will be happy to send out whoever wants a visualization. Yeah.
Fabulous. And I'll pop all that in the show notes just for easier access for people.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And this has just given me so many reminders as well. And I'm looking forward to getting some photos up on my altar of my
Yeah.
younger self to use, because I love the fact that we can make these excuses and things, but if when you look at that photo, like you're saying, like you feel it, like you really do feel that little you inside. And I think for me that will be a great reminder too, on the days where I'm like, no, I've got to do the laundry or tick off all these things on my to-do list, like having that visual reminder to go, you know what, you can have 10 minutes now, it's okay, it's okay. Give that back to my 7-year-old self. So thank you for all your wisdom and for everything that you've shared today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks to the audience for tuning in.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone, and we will speak on next week's episode.